Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cosy Rosie UK, and today I am sharing with you how to make these beautiful crochet sunflowers in 3 different sizes. We have a small sunflower, a medium, and then this lovely large one as well. I have popped mine onto a wreath once they've all been done so that it is ready to create a beautiful autumnal piece. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course the notification bell so that you never miss out another one of my crochet patterns or tutorials again. So the materials that you're going to need to make these beautiful sunflowers are scrap amounts of yarn. You will actually get all of these 3 sunflowers completed in about half a ball of each of these chunky yarns. For the medium brown colour, you're going to need 6 meters for the small, 13 meters for the medium, and 20 meters of medium brown in a bulky chunky weight yarn. For the shade wise, I've used Soft Fudge by Paintbox, and a good alternative is Mocha by Stylecraft Special Chunky. And then for the yellow, you're going to need 7 meters for your small, 13 meters for your medium, and a whopping 14 meters for your large sunflower. The yellow shades I've used Saffron, which again is Stylecraft Special Chunky. But it needs to be quite a bright yellow because once you've put it next to the brown, it does tend to dull the yellow a little bit. So don't go for like a wishy-washy yellow. It's really got to be quite bold. We're going to be using the recommended hook size for a chunky weight yarn, which is of course a 6mm crochet hook. You're going to need a pair of scissors, and I would recommend a lockable stitch marker because we're going to be working these centers of the flowers in continuous rounds, which means we're not going to join, and this will help us identify the start of our round. Finally, of course, you're going to need some toy stuffing. You don't need very much. It's just to fill out. I don't know if you can see, it's not that full. Just to give it a bit of a roundness to the top of the sunflower, or to the middle of the sunflower, should I say. So gather all of your materials and let's get started. So the pattern is worked by making 2 centres of the flowers that are then joined before working the petals in the round around those centres. The first middle that we're going to make is going to be fastened off, and then we don't fasten off the second one. Now I'm going to start by making a magic ring. So I just put the tail in my non-hook hand, wrap it around my first 2 fingers to create a cross at the back, and then I secure it with between my 4th finger and my 5th to create parallel lines at the front. I insert my hook underneath that front loop, pick up the back loop, twisting the hook towards me as I come up, and then I put the working strand of yarn onto my hook and bring it through the loop on my hook. That's how I make a magic circle. If you have any other way that you prefer to make a magic circle, please go ahead and do that. And if you really don't want to make a magic circle, you don't have to. You can simply make your slip knot as normal, and then make a beginning chain of 4 and slip stitch to that first chain to create a ring to work into. Now I am going to be making a magic circle because I just prefer the way that it makes the beginning of the project look. Remember that when you're making a magic circle adjustable ring, to hold your tail against that center ring so that you can pull that tail at the end to cinch it in. We're going to start by working into the middle of that ring, working 6 US single crochets, which is the same as a UK double crochet. So we insert the hook, we yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, and pull through those 2 loops. And that's number 1. We're going to insert again, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over the hook to pull through those 2 loops for number 2. I'm going to make a total of 6 of those. That's 3, 4, 5, and 6. Once you have your 6 single crochets worked into the center of that ring, we can then pull our tail to close the ring nice and tightly, and then we are ready to go into round 2. We are not joining into that first stitch. of the first round, we're just going to start working into it. And now's a really good time to get your stitch marker so that you are ready to mark your first stitch. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 single crochets at the end of round 1. Going into round 2, we're going to start by inserting our hook into that first stitch of the previous round. We yarn over and bring our loop up, and we're going to make that first single crochet of round 2. So we just yarn over and pull through both loops. We can then grab our stitch marker and mark that stitch, and we can mark that stitch we've just made, so we know for certain where the beginning of our round was. We're going to work a second single crochet into that same stitch that we've just worked into. So this one is worked into this stitch here. You can see you've got those 2 lines coming out next to that hole. So we're going to reinsert our hook, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over and pull through those next 2 loops to create a second stitch all into that same stitch. For the remaining of round 2, we're going to work 2 single crochets into each stitch around, which will double our stitch count to a total of 12. So working into our next stitch, we're inserting, bring our loop up, pull through 2 for number 1, reinsert, yarn over, bring your loop up, pull over, yarn over for number 2. We're going to repeat that into each stitch around, working 2 single crochets into each stitch. And at the end of round 2, we will have a stitch count of 12 single crochets. This is my final stitch, just before my stitch marker, just working my final single crochet. And at this point, you should have a total stitch count of 12. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and number 12. Once again, we're not joining this round at the end of round 2. We're just going to start working into that marked stitch for the first stitch of round 3. So just going to remove my marker for a moment. And then for round 3, we begin by working 1 single crochet into the first stitch. I'm going to pop my stitch marker back into that stitch we've just made. And then into the next stitch, not the same as we've just worked, we're going to work 2 single crochets. So that's 1 and 2. I'm going to repeat this all the way around, working 1 single crochet into the next stitch, followed by 2 single crochets into the next. By the time we get back around at the end of round 3, we'll have a stitch count of 18 and we'll have increased our stitch count by 6. So 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets into the next. Continue to repeat that all the way around and I will meet you at the end of round 3. You should end your round by working 2 single crochets into that last stitch before your marked stitch. And at the end of round 3, you should have 18 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and number 18 is on my hook. Now, if you're making the small sunflower, you can fasten off this first middle. You just remove your stitch marker, and I'd recommend slip stitching into the first stitch of the previous round before fastening off and just bringing that tail through so that you have those 18 stitches to work into. You can go ahead and weave those ends in and then move on and repeat all of this for your small sunflower. So at the end of round 3, if you're not making a small, you shouldn't have fastened off, and if you're moving on to joining, you won't be fastening off either. We're going to go into round 4, which both a medium and a large size sunflower will be making. For round 4, we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. I'm just going to pop my stitch marker into that first stitch of the round that we made so that we remember where we started. So we've worked 1 and 2, and then we're going to increase. So 1 and 2 into that next stitch. We're going to repeat that again all the way around, working 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches before working 2 single crochets into the next. 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches before increasing into that next stitch. I'm going to repeat that all the way around, and again we should be ending in our final stitch working an increase. So continue around working 1 single crochet into each of the next stitch, followed by 2 single crochets into the next, and I'll meet you at the end of round 4. So at the end of round 4 you should be ending working 2 double crochets into that final stitch, and you should have a total stitch count of 24 single crochets. That's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 24. If you are making a medium-sized sunflower, at this point on your first middle, we're going to slip stitch to that next stitch and fasten off. And then if you're making a large sunflower, we are going to continue on to round 5. If you're making a medium, you need to repeat rounds 1 to 4, and then you're going to continue on to joining. If you are continuing on to round 5 to make the middle of a large sunflower, we are going to start by working 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2, and 3. I haven't forgotten, need to pop in my stitch marker into that first stitch of the round. So 1, 2, and 3. Quickly lock that back in place. Once we've worked 1 single crochet into each of the next 3, you can guess we are going to work 2 single crochets into the next stitch. We're going to be repeating this around, working 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, and then we're going to increase into the next. Going to continue to repeat this all the way around. So that's 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches before we increase into the next. Continue to repeat that around. I can take you through the last round of our large sunflower. So you should be ending round 5 working a double crochet into that stitch just before our marker. At the end of round 5, we should have a total stitch count of 30 single crochets, and you may notice that you're getting some flat edges. To counteract that, we're going to work round 6 a little bit differently, and that will help keep this circular. So for round 6, we are going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. I'm going to pop my marker back in. And once we've worked those 2 single crochets, we're going to increase into the next stitch. We're then going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 before we increase again. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we increase 2 single crochets into the next. And that's going to help bring that curve back into this circle. Now we're going to continue to repeat this all the way around, working 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So that's 3 and 4, and then we increase. And unlike any of the other rounds, when you get to the end, you're going to work your final increase here, so at the 3rd from last stitch. So continue to work around, and I'll meet you after your final increase to work our last 2 stitches together. So we're working 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, and then we're increasing. I'm just working my final increase, and I'm 3 stitches away from my stitch marker. And all we need to do is work 1 single crochet into each of the last 2 stitches. So that's 1 and 2. So at the end of round 6, you should have increased a further 6 times, which will give you a stitch count of 36. At this point, you're going to fasten off your first large flower middle and then make a second one and meet me back here without fastening off. And then we can continue on to the joining. Now I've got one of each size of the flower centres, and I've worked up to round 4 on the medium sized, so I don't need those 2. And this is my second, and here is my first, which has been fastened off. We're going to make sure that we have the wrong sides being placed together, and we're going to join all the way around. It doesn't matter which size you're making, it's going to be the same instructions. Before we join, we're just going to make a little chain 1 with our working yarn on the second flower centre. We're going to pick up the first flower centre and we're going to work through the front and the back. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch on my flower centre, and then I'm going to get the first centre that we made and place my hook through that stitch we fastened off into. Just going to place that tail that side. I'm going to grab my working yarn, which is here somewhere. That's why people tell me to weave my ends in, but this is the reality of it. Make sure that this tail is coming through, and we are going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around, working through both layers. So I'm going to yarn over, bring my hook back through, and that means that I've got both flower centres on my hook now. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. And all we're doing is making sure that we work into the next stitch, and then we insert our hook through the next stitch on the other flower centre as well. Yarn over, bring a loop up and pull through 2. Now this is going to join these 2 together, and because we have the same number of stitches, we should have the same number of stitches to work through. So it's quite important that you don't work through the same stitch again. So you can see that this one has been joined, so that's the next one to go through. Yarn over, bring your loop up and pull through 2. We're going to continue to do this all the way around, but we need to make sure that we stuff lightly before we completely close. So continue to work all the way around. I'm just going to place these ends in the middle, and when you have about this many stitches left, we're going to stuff. So continue to work around, joining your 2 flower centres together, working through each stitch of both layers, working a single crochet into each. And then I'll meet you back when you have about 5 or 6 stitches remaining to join, and that's when we're going to stuff. So when you have a small opening left still to join, I'm going to push in any of these ends that I need to into the centre and out of the way, and then we just need to insert a small amount of toy stuffing into the middle as well. You can stuff it as much as you like. I just like them to be lightly stuffed, so there's a bit of roundness to the top. Really doesn't take much stuffing, especially when you've chucked your ends in as well. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And then we just need to work through these last few stitches to finish joining this round. Okay, that's my last stitch to be joined, and then we have our completed flower circles. I'm going to slip stitch to the next stitch just so we can fasten off. And then I am going to weave this end in. So you should have a total stitch count of 18 single crochets for your small flower centre, 24 for your medium, and 36 for your large. And I'm just going to weave the end in and out a few times. This is the joy of having toy stuffing, is that it hides your ends beautifully for you. It also gives you an option to kind of hide them a little bit as well. Hide the stuffing if it pokes out. There we go. snip that end, and there we have our completed flower centers. You're now going to need your yellow yarn. From here, we're going to join our yellow yarn into any stitch around. So you can just insert your hook with the right side facing. So you should be able to see your stitches facing you, whereas that's the wrong side and you can't see those stitches. Just insert your hook underneath any stitch, place your yarn over your hook with the tail to the back and bring it through that stitch. We're going to make a chain of 2, and that counts as a stitch. And then into that same stitch we've just done that chain 2, we're going to yarn over to make a US double crochet, the same as a UK treble crochet. So once you've yarned over, we're reinserting into the same stitch that we've just joined. We yarn over, bring a 3rd loop up, we yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over for a 2nd time and pull through the last 2. We're going to work back into this stitch once again, but this time we're making a US treble crochet, the same as a UK double treble. So we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook twice. We're going to insert back into the same stitch again. We're going to yarn over and bring up a 4th loop. We're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through the next 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. To complete this first petal, we're going to make a picot, which means we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook to create a chain and repeat that again. So we're making a chain of 2, and then we're going to slip stitch back into that first chain that we made. So I'm just going to go underneath 1 loop of the chain and slip stitch. So we yarn over, pull through the loop and straight through the loop on our hook. And that's our picot. We're then going to work into the next stitch and we're going to reverse the stitches that we've made. So we start by wrapping the yarn around the hook twice to make a US treble, the same as a UK double treble. So 1, 2 for a double, and we're inserting into that next stitch. We yarn over, bring our 4th loop up, going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. We yarn over, pull through the next 2, yarn over to pull through the last 2. Oops, move that out of the way. We're then going to make a US double crochet. So we yarn over the hook once. This is the same as a UK treble. We're working into that same stitch again. So we yarn over, insert, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over again and pull through the next 2. To finish this petal, we're going to make a chain 2 and slip stitch to that same stitch once again. So we yarn over, pull through for chain 1, yarn over, pull through for your 2nd chain, and then we're slip stitching to that same stitch again. So we're just inserting into the stitch, we yarn over, bring our loop through and straight through the loop on our hook. And that makes our first petal. This little loose loop here, that's just my chain joining. If I just pull my chain, it just tightens that up a bit. We're then going to slip stitch into that next stitch, and that will allow us to begin our next petal, which is all going to be worked into that same stitch. So we begin by making a chain of 2, 1 and 2. We're then going to work a US double crochet into that same stitch, followed by a US treble, which is the same as a UK double treble. And again, we're yarning over around the hook twice and then inserting into the same stitch again. Bring our loop up, pull through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2. We're then going to make our picot. So we make a chain of 2 before we slip stitch back into that first chain that we made. So there's 1 and there's 2. Just pick up 1 loop of that chain, pull through and straight through the loop on our hook. Just split the yarn. And then we're ready to work into the next stitch, working back down those stitch sizes. So we start by making a US treble crochet, wrapping the yarn around the hook twice, and we're going into that next stitch. So we've worked here, we're going into the next one, We yarn over to bring our 4th loop up, pull through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Continuing in this same stitch, we're going to make a US double crochet, the same as a UK treble. And we finish the petal by making a chain of 2. We slip stitch into the same stitch to complete that petal. And then ready to make the next one, we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch along. You may need to twiddle your picots a little bit to make sure that they stand nice and peaky. We're going to continue to repeat this all the way around, working across 2 stitches with each petal. So from here we would start our next petal with our chain of 2 before working our petal, which is a double crochet followed by a treble crochet, we then make our picot, which is our chain 2, slip stitch to the first chain that we made. We're then going to be ready to work into the next stitch with our treble crochet, followed by a double crochet into the same stitch. And then finally we make a chain of 2 before we slip stitch into that same stitch again. Oops. And then we slip stitch into the next stitch, ready to begin our next petal. So they are going to feel too close to each other, but that is to allow us to make them look like a double layer without having to do so many petals. So this, I put the 1 to the back and 2 in front, and that's going to give us overall too many petals, but it's going to look nice. So regardless of which size you're making, you have enough stitches to work each petal across 2 stitches. Be careful where you made your slip stitch because you haven't got as many stitches there as you think. So I've used 2, 4, 6, there's 8, and that's actually going to be 10 and 11 there. So we have to be careful about that little slip stitch where we fastened off. So continue to repeat that all the way across, making sure that you slip stitch into the next stitch. I've already done it. To start your next petal with your chain 2, your double crochet, your treble crochet, your picot, before working into the next stitch with a treble crochet, your double crochet, finishing off with a chain of 2, slip stitching to the same stitch to finish, and then we slip stitch to the next to begin the next petal. So continue to work that around, and I will meet you once you've worked all of your petals right around here. I'm just working my final petal, and I'm just having to fold this one out of the way because it is in my way. Oh, I've done my treble. And then double crochet, final chain 2, and there we go. To finish off, once you've worked your last petal, we are simply going to slip stitch into the next stitch, and then we can fasten off. Make sure that is nice and tight. The last thing to do, of course, is just to weave in those final ends. And once again, oh gosh, I hate this needle. And I'm just going to bring it back through the stitch that I slip stitched through, just to make sure that it's out of the way. And then you can either be really naughty and tie a knot to make sure everything is secure. I do like to make things secure. And then of course you can just weave those ends straight into and through your stuffing once again, if you can find a way through. And there we have it. So we have another medium now. So now you need to go ahead and make a different size if you want to. I like the collection of the different sizes, definitely. and I like odd numbers, so I will probably make another 3 and make another wreath for someone. But it's nice that they come out a nice consistent size, and you've got 3 sizes here to choose from. I hope you've enjoyed making your very own crochet sunflower with me today, and don't forget to share a picture on social media. You can tag me using @CosyRosyUK, and I will see you in the next video.